I got a couple questions I just got to ask to make sure I know where I am. Who here believes in people over profit? Let me hear you. And who believes in a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, not of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations? Let me hear you. So I know I didn't go far because this must be Ann Arbor. I say that, look, I know I'm the first candidate here. I do have to claim home field advantage. I live like 10 minutes away. So I'm in the township, and when I looked at my calendar, I was like, all right, I don't have to go an hour and a half in the car for tonight's town hall. I'm so grateful to be with you all tonight. My name is Abdul El-Sayed. I am running for U.S. Senate because my name was tailor-made for American politics. Let me tell you how I became Abdul. Okay? So I was born in 1984. I didn't become Abdul until 1989. So I was born in Rochester Hills. My parents are both Egyptian immigrants. They met and married, and then very quickly got divorced, but after having conceived a child who was me, making me, I think in the music parlance, a one-hit wonder. And so I was raised by my father and my stepmom, Jackie, born and raised in Gratiot County, Michigan, literally middle of the state, a town called St. Louis. She's a daughter of the American Revolution. Her family's been in this part of the world since before the Civil War. And so you can imagine this house that I grew up in, built by Muhammad and Jackie, all right? So I started school in Columbia, Missouri. And my stepmom had a certain sense of what I was going to be up against, because my name, Abdul Rahman, has sounds that come out of parts of people's throats most people don't know they have, all right? So you can imagine her gingerly approaching this conversation as I'm about to start kindergarten. She's like, this is not going to work. And so they were looking for different nicknames. And the first thing they thought of was the nickname for Abdul Rahman in Arabic, which is booty. That's about the only option that would have been worse. So they kept thinking about it. This was 1989, so who knows who was topping the charts in the summer of 1989 with an absolute banger called Straight Up, Abdul. And then there was another popular culture. Exactly, so he's a little bit shorter than me, quit playing basketball right around 1989, played for the LA Lakers, right? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So Abdul it was, and I walked into kindergarten named Abdul, and I've been Abdul ever since. Now, growing up as Abdul, you can imagine running for office was not on my bingo card. I wanted to be a doctor, and I'll tell you a little bit about why. So as a child of immigrants, what tends to happen is you get shipped off to the mother country usually before school ends because the tickets are cheaper, all right? So I get shipped off most of the time with another family, and I'd spend my time with my grandmother, my Teta Su'ad, my grandfather, my aunts and uncles, and my cousins, all right? And then by the end of the summer, I'd come back and I'd spend the rest of my summer at a cottage on a lake in Montcalm County, Michigan. So I'd spend my summers between my Teta Su'ad and my grandma Judy. My Teta Su'ad, wisest, most intelligent person I ever met in my life. She never got to go to school. She was illiterate. She was the 9th of 14, raised in mid-century Egypt. She herself raised 6 kids, of 8 to whom she gave birth. 2 died before their first birthday. My father was her eldest. He watched his siblings pass before he turned 5. But she had this incredible moral clarity and sometimes a very brutal way of sharing. Best storyteller I've ever met in my life. We have a very strong oral history tradition in Arab culture, right? 1001 Nights. I remember watching Aladdin in theaters when I was a kid and being like, no, my grandma's version was better. But she also had a way of teaching you these morals that sometimes really stuck. So I can remember being 13 years old. I've got my American kid swagger, my hat backwards. She pulls me aside, Habibi, come sit down. Points to one of my cousins, that one is smarter than you. Points to the next one, I don't have to tell you, is taller and better looking. Third one, nicer and kinder hearted. Fourth one works harder than you do. Fifth one's more athletic. Kept going. By the end of it, I'm like a hat on a puddle on the floor. I'm like, Teta, what do I got going for me? She's like, Habibi, you have the best thing of all. I was like, what's that? She's like, you get to go back to America at the end of the summer. She was teaching me about opportunity. See, I got vaccinated against diseases that killed an aunt and uncle I never got to meet before I even knew what a vaccine was. I got to go to incredible public schools, an incredible public university. I got to go to medical school funded by a public fellowship, the NIH, all right? People sometimes will look at my name and say, oh, you must hate America. No, trust me, I love America. Because I both benefited from the tremendous opportunities America gave me, and I had a front row seat to what my life should have been like, but for the opportunities I got growing up in America. But here's the thing about it. When I would go off to Egypt those summers, I traveled 15 hours. And in those 15 hours, I would travel 10 years difference in life expectancy. I didn't have to go 15 hours. I could go 15 minutes. Cross 8 Mile from where I grew up in Oakland County, and I could cross the same 10-year life expectancy gap. I love America so much that I am willing to ask why children whose families have been here far longer than mine did not get the same opportunities that I got growing up. And I wanted to be a doctor to fix that. So I went off, studied. I got to go to a great university not too far from here. Go blue, go green if you do that too. Now look, first time anybody ever told me I should consider running for office, it was at my college graduation. The year was 2007. I was the valedictorian of my class, Literature, Science, and the Arts, and I was chosen to give the student commencement speech at Michigan. And everybody who actually went that year went to go listen to the main speaker, who happened to be President Bill Clinton, including my own parents. So I worked hard on that speech. There were like 60,000 people there. It's still the biggest speech I've ever given in my life. And I nailed it, y'all. So I give my speech, Clinton gives his speech. He mentions me in his speech. My parents clapped for me for the first time in my life. And then afterwards he comes up to me, he says, son, why are you going to medical school? The first thing that came to my mind is like, well, I'm brown and Muslim. It's just what we do. But also, I love people, and I love science, and this is how I want to serve. He said, that's great, but I got to tell you, you have a gift for communicating. And maybe someday you'll run for office. I was like, Mr. President, it's really nice of you to say, did you see my name? There are 11 letters in my name, and that's just the first one, all right? People like me don't get to run for office. He kind of chuckled about it, and we went our separate ways. That was 2007. And in 2008, I watched a guy named Barack Hussein Obama run for and win the presidency. So I filed that back in my mind. I earned a Rhodes Scholarship, got to go to Oxford, do a PhD in public health. I came back, finished med school at Columbia University. And in those last 2 years of med school, I finally got about to doing the kind of work that I trained so long to do. And in medicine, at the end of the day, you spend a whole lot of time to ask and answer 2 questions. What's wrong, and how can I help? That's it. And too often, the answer to what was wrong had a lot less to do with all that physiology I spent all that time studying, and a lot more to do with pathologies in our politics. Do you get to breathe clean air? Do you get to drink clean water? Do you get to walk in your local community without being victimized by a neighbor or the state itself? Can you afford the groceries that have the micronutrients that will grow a brain, or just the ones that have the macronutrients that grow a belly? Can you even see a doctor in the first place without having to worry about falling into debt? And as I kept reflecting on this, I realized that my work had to be back outside a clinic and hospital, so I followed it back out. It led me to the opportunity to rebuild Detroit's health department after the Snyder administration had moved in and forced it to be shut down. They shut down a 185-year-old health department in a city with a higher infant mortality rate than my father's native Egypt. A city where our children face 3-fold the probability of asthma hospitalization and 4-fold the probability of lead exposure than the state average. Shut it down. I was hired to rebuild it. I was 30 years old, had no clue what I was doing because I had just taken a job, left a job as a professor in public health. And I remember walking into this department, okay? They had brought back 150 employees or so, and they were all sitting in one big room, kind of like this, in the back of the building where people pay parking tickets. And I have to be honest with you, for the first 2 weeks, I was like completely lost. I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, I spent a lot of time thinking about theory, but not as much thinking about practice. Like, what do we even do here? And that's when I got to meet a little boy. He was 3 years old, 4th child of a 21-year-old mom, met his father maybe 4 times in his life because the boy's dad was in jail. This kid had this incredible confidence. Usually when you meet a 3-year-old, usually what happens is, right, they see your eyes, realize they don't know who you are, and then bury their face back in their parent. They don't want to look at you, right? This kid didn't do that. Walks right up to me, gives me a handshake, gives me a big hug, walks back to his mom, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, this is either the most rational or the most confident 3-year-old I've ever met in my life. And I couldn't help but contrast that confidence of his to the circumstances in which he was growing up. And then I realized that in 5 minutes, that little boy had just taught me more about public health and frankly government than I had learned in all 7 years of grad school. And that's this. If nothing else, the work of government ought to be about justifying the kind of confidence that any child should have in the life that he or she is going to lead. So we set about to rebuilding our department around the well-being of kids. It led us to doing things like this. We realized that 30% of our kids who tested positive for vision deficits would come back testing positive again next year, meaning we knew they needed glasses and nobody got them glasses. So what we did is we put optometrists on vans at schools so that when kids got tested, they would go get their full optometric exam. We were able to deliver them 2 pairs of glasses within 2 weeks of a vision test. That program that we brought to the city of Detroit for the first time, that has since delivered 50,000 pairs of glasses across the state of Michigan. I remember hearing about Flint, and the immediate thing I kept thinking about was, given the state of our schools in Detroit, it was likely that kids might be exposed to the same lead we were hearing about in that place where we systematically concentrate our most vulnerable people most of the day, most of the year. And so we had every school, daycare, and Head Start tested for lead in the water. In the first 68 schools we tested, 19 tested positive for lead. And we got them on a path to being lead-free. And I got to work with folks like Dr. Mona, who broke the Flint water crisis story, to help rewrite lead policy for the state overall. When a Marathon Petroleum refinery, y'all know Marathon Petroleum? If you ever go down south on 75, right? It's that big skeleton city as you pass the city, right? It's got like that Pistons basketball, smells like somebody farted in the car. That's Marathon Petroleum. They're the biggest emitter of pollution and the most polluted zip code in the entire state of Michigan. They wanted to raise their emissions despite the fact that the EPA had said that there was too much sulfur dioxide in the air. So we started working with the local community, and together we stood up. We forced them to invest $10 million of their own money to reduce their emissions when they had wanted to increase them. More recently, I've been serving Wayne County, our neighboring county to the east, leading Health, Human, and Veteran Services, overseeing a 550 employee unit with a budget of about $172 million. Now, I was hired to oversee all of the things that mega department does, everything from the county coroner's office to vaccines to a WIC program to federally qualified health centers to veteran services, big department. But I was also hired to do some big things after COVID because we knew that our county had been hit hardest. One thing we realized was that Wayne County ranked number 8 for medical debt nationwide among counties. Now, when you think about medical debt, you can erase medical debt for pennies on the dollar, so we did. We were able to put forward $7 million to erase $700 million in medical debt for 300,000 people. It is the biggest medical debt erasure in Michigan history. We knew that we were also the epicenter of the overdose epidemic. And so we put life-saving Narcan in vending machines for free in 100 different locations across Wayne County. It's vended 3,500 units of Narcan already in county. Rather than take on just one polluter, we put together an air quality monitoring system of 100 air quality monitors so folks can get real-time information about air quality across the county and use the data to hold major polluters accountable. It is still the biggest air quality monitoring system ever put up by a county anywhere. And I love that job. Like when I think about the kind of work my tata would have been proud of, that would have been that kind of work. And I really enjoyed the work, and I'm never going to forget. Feels like 6 years ago, it was like more like 7 months ago now, when they froze federal funds. Remember that? So I'm sitting in my office frantically looking at all these budgets, all of these programs that are frozen. The WIC program, food on the table for moms and babies, frozen. Federally qualified health centers, the last line of healthcare defense for people who otherwise cannot get it, frozen. Our vaccines program, frozen. And on the same day, I get a push notification to my phone that after a long and storied career, our sitting U.S. Senator has decided not to run for re-election. And at that point, I had to ask myself, where is the fight for all of the things that I have dedicated my career to now? Now look, I could be here all day enumerating all the insane things that are coming out of Washington, D.C. I'm going to name a couple here just for clarity. The first is that big ugly bill. People don't appreciate that 80% of our mental health infrastructure is funded via Medicaid. So much of the special needs for children, Medicaid. Rural and urban hospitals, funded in large part via Medicaid. To gut Medicaid, to pass a tax cut for the richest people, and then ask our kids' kids to pay the price when you had the audacity to tell us that we could not pass Medicare for all, we could not actually think about investing in our schools because what would it do to the national debt? And then you blow up the national debt to give billionaires a tax cut? No. I told you, I had my med school education funded by the NIH. The folks I went to med school with, my MD, PhD colleagues, are people who are the top of the top of the top of all their classes. And rather than go cash out at this hospital or that, they decided to take jobs where they took literally 75% pay cuts to dedicate their careers to science. I think about all of those folks who now don't know whether or not their projects will continue to be funded, people who are working on leading edge questions. Now, I know we're super polarized, but you'd think that cancer at least would be one of those few bipartisan issues, but I guess not. Because there are people who may die of cancers in the future whose cures could have been identified but for the elimination of this research. And that's just two things. Never mind the disappearing of people off the streets, the targeting of politically unpopular victims to shred our Constitution, to take on or destroy precedent like habeas corpus and the rule of law. So yeah, we gotta stand up to Donald Trump. Now I told you, I started school as a kid named Abdul in a place where nobody else was named anything close to Abdul. I have seen my fair share of bullies, and trust me, every bully that I've ever met understood that I was not gonna let them take my lunch. So I got receipts standing up to bullies. But it's not just about what you fight against. This is the thing sometimes we forget. It's about what you fight for. Now y'all might remember I ran for governor back in 2018. You remember that feeling, right? Right after Trump had been elected the first time, after 8 years of Obama, we all wanted to believe that the record had just skipped. It was a mistake. I think we've been thoroughly disabused of that. And I said something at the time folks weren't quite ready to hear, which is that Donald Trump himself is not the disease of our politics. Donald Trump is simply the worst symptom of the disease of our politics. The disease instead is a system that allows corporations and billionaires to buy politicians to do their bidding. It allows them to rig our economic system in ways that leaves us getting paid less for the work we do and having to pay more for the things we have to buy from them. I happen to know that you all, like me, are hostages of DTE. You don't got a choice. If you want your lights to turn on, you got to pay DTE. Am I wrong? Now look, when I bought my house, all right, I said, you know what, I'm gonna do my part for the environment. I'm gonna put solar on my roof. And it pays for about 40% of my electrical bill. But here's the crazy thing. My bill now is bigger than it was before I put solar on my roof. So that means that in the last 4 years, my bill has gone up 40%. Guess what? My electricity still goes out every time the wind goes. And here's the craziest part of all right? I'm a scientist, so this one really gets me. If I harvest more electricity from the sun and sell it back to DTE, I sell it back at a lower rate than what I would buy it for, even though my electrons are better. They came from the sun, all right? That one really gets my goat. Now, you know why? Because they're supposed to be a regulated monopoly. But you know what they realized is that instead of actually trying to make our electricity better or more consistent and maybe bury our power lines, God forbid, instead they realized that it'd be a lot better investment for them to buy off politicians. They are the biggest single spender in Michigan politics. Here's the other thing that kills me. When I ran for governor, they spent $200,000 to beat me. Sometimes I wonder, how much of my own money did they spend to beat me in an election? Don't get me started on Blue Cross, huh? But that's the thing about it. If we're serious about actually taking on Donald Trump, if we're serious about saving democracy, we have to make sure that our democracy can actually deliver. And there are a lot of people out there who say we've got to save democracy, but are conveniently ignoring the fact that for a lot of people out there, as they've watched their income dwindle, as they've watched their costs rise, they ask, what does this democracy do for me? And if we don't have an answer for that, then I worry a lot about the future of our democracy. So here's what we're running to do. 3 simple things, and I'm going to give you a bonus for it. All right? Number 1, we are running to take corporate money out of politics. We're going to take on the Citizens United regime. We're going to force the Supreme Court to rule again And we are going to keep shoving it down their throats until they realize that the First Amendment does not protect money and the 14th Amendment does not protect corporations. Number two, we got to put more money in people's pockets. How do you do that? Number one, we've got to make sure that the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, has the power to actually enforce antitrust laws in this country. No longer should corporations be able to buy one another up, create monopolies that we all have to live under in ways that suppress our wages and raise our prices. Number two, we've got to enable folks to form or join unions in every sector of economic life. And number three, we've got to make it easier to build and scale small businesses in America. Finally, in the richest, most powerful country in the world, it is insane that we cannot provide every single person access to health insurance from cradle to grave. So we have to abolish medical debts and pass Medicare for all. Now look, here's the craziness, and I'm sure all of y'all have been watching this. In an era where our kids' schools are crumbling, we watch our literacy rates literally crater into the floor. It is an insane thing that our government is sending our tax dollars abroad to subsidize foreign militaries to drop bombs on other kids in their schools when we should be spending them on our kids in our schools over here. I do not believe any of us pay taxes so that we can subsidize other people's militaries, and we got to get about to actually investing in our children here rather than empowering others to kill children over there. Now look, I get it. My name's Abdul. I'm sure you've heard the Whisper campaign. Abdul's great, but his name's Abdul though. And look, this campaign is not about me or my name. This campaign is about whether or not we, collectively, are willing to take on the powerful, are willing to take back our government in the name of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. I have been to more than 40 different cities. I have done more than 60 different town halls. When your name's Abdul, you take nothing for granted. I never have and I never will. And no matter where I go, you could close your eyes. And whether you're in a VFW hall, or a union hall in a place like Escanaba in the UP, or in a church in Detroit, people are talking about the same issues. It just shouldn't be this hard. It shouldn't be this hard to afford a second bag of groceries. It shouldn't be this hard to see a doctor. It shouldn't be this hard to work the same job tomorrow I worked yesterday. It shouldn't be this hard to believe I can ever own a home if I'm under 40, or if I can stay in my home if I'm over 65. It shouldn't be this hard to know my tax dollars are being used for me and my kids rather than kill people over there and their kids. It just shouldn't be this hard. We've got an opportunity here right now to take back our government, to build along that idea of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And the only way we do it is when people come together, not despite their differences, but because of their differences, and the opportunity to reach hands anyway, to build the kind of government that delivers all of the nice things we need and deserve in this country. It should not be this hard. And my friends, my name is Abdul, I get it. But when they tell me I can't win, my point is not to look at me, look at them. Look at all of these people all over this state who want better for themselves and their kids. Look at how they're willing to reach across the divides they've been told they cannot reach beyond. Beyond divides of geography or race or religion or sexual identity or orientation, they are reaching across to build something that is greater than the sum of the parts. That is what wins in American politics. And it may just be that my name is Abdul, but I tell you, whether your name is Abdul or Mike or Sharon, we all deserve better. And the only way we get it is if we put ourselves in our politics. And we have an opportunity in this election to rethink things. So my name is Abdul El-Sayed. I am running for U.S. Senate Ann Arbor. I really appreciate the opportunity to share it with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, let's do question and answer. Does anybody have a question? Jason.
I'm touched to hear, my name is Jason, I recently graduated from the University of Michigan. I'm really touched to hear about your work with the Wayne County what's the word, Department of Health, and especially your work, especially when you were looking at all the ridiculous federal funding freezes, yes? The issue is, you can't abolish an exam. When the next president comes in, 2028, 2029, when the next Democratic Senate majority, House majority, trifecta, whatever, comes in, and then you start saying, we want to disperse this money to all these people for five-year university grants. And you get back that the doctors say, okay, but what if you lose the next election? We have a problem. When the rule of law is torn up to this degree, it becomes necessary to punish the people who broke the law in order to ensure the law continues. Do you have a thought about how far you are willing to do to pursue the lawbreakers who broke the law freezing the funds the first time?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. And I think there's a couple of things about what you shared. The most important way to win the future is to build and demonstrate movements that deliver the basic things that people need and deserve. And the challenge that I think Democrats often have, and this is an indivisible group, permit me to speak freely?
Please.
Democrats do this thing where they say that we want to do all the right things. We want to fight for your health care and your housing. And they come with like 10-point plans that look like a bowl of spaghetti. And then when it comes to actually doing the work of making bureaucracy do the thing, we get so procedural about it that the thing doesn't get done for years and years. So people forget who did it. And then the direct things that Democrats could obviously do, they conspicuously choose not to. I just want to say something. You all remember that like not that long ago, there was a health insurance CEO that got murdered in cold blood. You remember that?
Yeah.
Terrible thing, murder is bad. Okay? Murder is bad, nobody should ever murder anybody. Now, a weird thing happened. That the American public seemed to have a little bit more empathy for the murderer than the murdered. Y'all remember? That was kind of weird. Now, you might think that an enterprising party that was serious about winning elections might be like, wow, it seems like the American public is very angry about the cost of healthcare. Maybe we should talk about healthcare. It's touchy. Why is it touchy? Well, see, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Pfizer, and Novo Nordisk, and you name all the other pharmaceuticals, and also the hospitals, all of them don't really like this whole conversation. They don't really want us to talk about the obvious thing, like guaranteeing people health care through Medicare for all. So this is kind of a hard thing to talk about, so maybe we just shouldn't talk about it. Have you noticed that nobody's talking about it? Isn't it kind of wild that when you talk about 20% of our economy that literally touches every single person and nobody loves, that we're like not talking about it? Now why? Well, when they do talk about it, it sounds something like this. I want to give you health care. Okay, how? I'm gonna make it more affordable. Cool. All right, how are you gonna do it? We're gonna health care. You're like, no, you just said the same thing with a lot more passion. And it's weird because you're not willing to tell me how. I'm willing to tell you how. We need to pass Medicare for all. We need to guarantee every single person health care from the time they are born to the time they live a long, healthy life. Okay? So, to the point that I'm making here, I think the point that you're making is we have to be willing to punish Republicans for the ways that they have run roughshod over the law, right? And I think we need to make sure that the law is enforced. And as a US Senator, I am looking forward to hauling RFK Jr. up and grilling him to the point where he is more than well done. All right? To the point where his own mom will be like, no, that's too well done for me. Okay? Now, that's part of it. But I think that the way that we win is that when we win, we deliver immediately on the things we can do immediately. So what does that mean to me? That means we should immediately, the day we are elected, the first bill we should pass should eliminate medical debt for everybody. Why? Because people see immediately, you got elected and you did that thing. See what I'm saying? And Democrats need to stop being so proceduralist about everything. And we need to be thinking directly about what people articulate as a function of consequence. And you made a really good point. You said, you know, you can't forget an example. One of the things Trump did is that he pushed everything to the edge, and he leaves a lot of Democrats being like, how come y'all don't have this kind of energy when it comes to like giving people health care and building better schools? So maybe we should have that kind of energy when it comes to giving people health care and building better schools, protecting the environment, right, and making sure people have more money in their pocket. And I think if we do that, we win more elections. And that's how you right-size our democracy. I worry about playing the game where the answer to what they did is punish them rather than build the future better, right? And so I think we can do both, but if I had to pick one, it's build a better future that people attribute to electing, right, Democrats. And that means making sure that Democrats are about building a better future. And I worry that right now, the Democratic Party is not about doing that. Yeah. Too often people will tell you, why should you really elect you? Because you're not Trump? I'm sorry, it's not enough. It clearly lost last time. So if we don't have real plans, and are not talking about real issues, and are not willing to buck our donors, right, to protect and empower our voters, we will lose. And not only will we lose an election, we will lose the future, and we may lose our democracy in the process. I really appreciate your question.
Let's see here. How about Eric?
Yes, my question is, you mentioned small businesses, and I'm wondering if you could tell us specifically what you could do to help small businesses.
Yeah, thanks. So the question was, what specifically can you do for small businesses? So I'll tell you what we did in Wayne County. We operated a government to small business health insurance program, and we built a program to offer new small businesses 3 months of free health insurance. And the idea was, hey look, we can use the fact that health insurance is the hardest part, right, of starting a small business for you, your family, and your employees, and we can de-risk that for you for 3 months, right? So part of what I'm talking about here is that if you want to build a small business, the best thing we can do is we can buy you out of the struggle just to afford the basic dignities of life. Medicare for All is a small business empowerment program, right? Investing in public schools is a small business empowerment program. But then beyond that, huge corporations play this game with state and local governments. They pit them against each other for whoever is willing to give them bigger and bigger tax breaks. And I would rather than giving huge corporations who don't need the tax break, I would rather give small businesses tax breaks. Step back. Our economy is really good at making billionaires, okay? It's too good at making billionaires. And that's because billionaires rig the system to make sure that they can stay billionaires, yeah? You know how many millionaires with an M you can have for one billionaire with a B?
1,000.
1,000! You could have 1,000! I would rather live in an economy where we make 1,000 millionaires than 1 billionaire. I don't begrudge people their millions. I really don't. I begrudge them their billions. And so part of it is also taxing wealth so that we can invest in things like healthcare and schools and infrastructure, and we can empower small businesses to have the kind of tax breaks that allow them to grow and scale and provide jobs for folks in their community. I would rather a business leader have to look their workers in the eye and spend their money locally than have a weird tax shelter in Delaware, right, and figure out how they can play every small little town against itself, right, so that they can get a bigger tax break, so that their quarterly bottom line looks better and their stock price goes up and they can retire to the Hamptons. Like, I don't keep playing that game. And I don't think we have to. And so, for me, that's the vision. And so it's about rethinking where the orientation is. So, to answer your question, give people health care, give people better schools, give people better infrastructure, cut small business taxes, and tax major wealth.
Karen, I'm very pleased with much of what I'm hearing you say, but I'm wondering if you're willing to zoom about 100 yards out. We are assuming that there will be free and fair elections. I like what you say about winning elections, but I'm wondering what the role of the candidate and then the politician is to discuss the F word. And the F word that I'm preoccupied with these days is fascism. I'm somewhat of a moderate. I feel that we are standing about knee-deep in fascism right now, and I am missing conversation from Chuck Schumer, from Debbie Dingell, from Senator Peters, from Senator Slotkin, and others about the very real danger that we are in of sliding to autocracy, and I'm not hearing enough about our plan to stop that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I told you about some of my summers in Egypt. I'm never going to forget that first time my grandmother told me, you can't talk about politics here. There is no democracy in Egypt, okay? The walls have ears. So you can't say anything about the president. And I'm a bit of an iconoclast if it's not clear. So that day, we went down to the market, and I found the choicest words that my cousins taught me that had to do with the other F word. And I used them about the president. My grandmother flips out. She pulls me aside. She says, I told you you can't do that. I was like, fine. Nobody did anything. Until that night. Plainclothes cops came to the house. Said, where's that kid? And I've never seen my grandfather afraid before that point. Guy sold vegetables in a fish market. He's seen everything, okay? And he's like, go get your passport. I pull out my passport. He holds it like an amulet. He said, you can't do anything to him. He's an American. And they went away. So my US passport protected my freedom of speech 3,000 miles away in the 90s. Now, the last time I told my dad I was going to run for office, a kid who grew up in Egypt, who's been an American citizen since the mid-'80s, first thing he said was like, you're gonna get killed. I was like, whoa, okay, wow, that's a lot. This time, he's like, you have to run. I was like, I got kids though. You're gonna get killed. He's like, listen, for the better part of 50 years, I've been able to take for granted that I can say anything about anything to anyone, anywhere, and no one can tell me anything. And I worry that for your daughters and your brother's sons, that's no longer going to be the case. You have to run. And what I'm trying to express to you is the act of practicing democracy is itself the most important way to protect democracy. And so we've thought through this scenario, and you better believe, right, when I make the general election next August, what they're doing and saying about the candidate out of New York is going to look like pennies compared to what they're going to say and do about me, all right? But the thing about it is this, is that it's because of that we win. It's because of that attention that they will backfire and we will win. Because people understand that democracy is about protecting your choice. Your choice of what to say, your choice of who to love, your choice of how to pray, your choice of where to live, your choice of what to do, right? And when you start trying to tell people that they cannot have a choice, whether you do it in soft ways by spending a whole bunch of money in the primary or a general election to try and tell people they don't really have one, or you do it in big ways by trying to fix the outcomes of an election, people will respond to that. So in a lot of ways, I am running because the only way to protect our democracy is to use our democracy to the hilt. I don't play the game, if you haven't noticed. I just don't, right? And the reason why is because democracy wasn't supposed to be played. Democracy is about an earnest conversation between people about who we are and who we want to be. And it's about having that conversation out in the open and daring them to stop us that we actually fight fascism. The biggest test of our democracy is whether or not somebody named Abdul El-Sayed in the critical swing state of Michigan can run a free and fair election. So my contribution to trying to save our democracy is to practice our democracy to the highest level and to do it in ways that bring everyone along, right? And I think that's the key thing. Now when we win, right, at that point, it's about all of the things you do and leverage your office to the hilt. Last thing I'm going to say about this. I think a lot of people don't understand or don't appreciate that the value of their office isn't simply the procedural privileges that come with the office. It's not just the legislation that you can vote on. It's not just what you sponsor. It's also the platform and the leadership that you show in the interstitia of the thing, right? And again, if it's not quite clear, I'm not somebody who sits back and stays quiet. So to me, it's about the conversation I can have with the American public about who we are and who we want to be. It's about the way we leverage our leadership to platform the stories of people who have been run roughshod rather than the insane advice that it seems like these Democratic poobahs are trying to tell everybody about rolling over and playing dead. I'm like, what kind of crazy shit is that? You're going to roll over and play dead? They're just going to run over you again. Like, I'm sorry, but it makes no sense. So Roll over and play dead, I will not. Okay? And the only way that those of us who are afraid of our democracy, or for losing our democracy, the only way we save it is by using it to the hilt. Is by choosing what we do and daring them to stop us. And it also has to be done in numbers. We can't just wait for the people who are most affected to step up. So you got some privileges, use them. And for me, the choice to run, I got a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. I this is like, I don't think I put them to bed now for like days and days. Tonight I was close, so I got to like, have an hour and a half. And I had to like literally run away from my youngest one because I had to get here in time. And I was just sitting there, I was like, man, like that is a terrible feeling. And at the same time, I hope that someday I get to explain to her that the reason I might have run away is to build the kind of place where she can be proud of who she is. So it's all of us doing this work, all right? So I really appreciate the question, and I appreciate your concern on the issue. And the thing about it is when you feel that, step forward, not back.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kelsey Cohen. I am from Sylvan Township, just outside of Chelsea. I grew up in Mason, Michigan, which is right next to Jackson, which has one of our largest prisons in the state. I would love to hear you talk a little bit about the ways that you would reform our justice and incarceration in this country. It is a dirty secret that nobody likes to talk about. We have slave labor coming out of our jails. We have more and more people going into jails, and very little restorative justice or reforms within the system.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have to understand incarceration as the worst product of a very complex system. And it's a complex system that ends up being the catch-all for our policy failures up front. And so there's a bunch of things I think we have to do. Number one, we cannot continue to reward electorally judges and prosecutors for putting people behind bars. Number two, we should not be allowing people to make money off of incarcerating somebody. That should be illegal. We're caught between this, we call them departments of corrections, but really they're departments of punishment. And if you're serious about the corrections part, then the day someone gets incarcerated, you should be working to get them back out. Which means that you're invested in all the things that they could not get because of our policy failures on the front end. Invested in education, invested in mental health, invested in physical health, right? Invested in re-engaging a family unit from the day somebody gets in. Before, we've got to be thinking about the people who do the work and how we can make sure that they can exist in equilibrium. One of the things that's happened is that we have taken out, or rather than deal with the structure of the system, we have taken out our failure to do this well on the people who we ask to do it. So what happens is we underfund these systems and then say that that's a win. But then what happens is you have very few people who are working many, many overtime shifts. You pull out all of the systems that you want to build around somebody who's incarcerated, right, as a goal of dropping a budget line. And so one of the things I think we all have to be asking, to the point that I tried to make earlier, is how do we address the whole system in a way that makes the most sense? So at the point of policing, I don't believe in qualified immunity. I don't believe you should be able to hurt somebody and be protected because you hurt them. I do believe, though, that we should be investing in providing mental health services, right, for folks, and rather than answering every problem on a street with a person with a gun, right, we should recognize that for a lot of people, these are responses to mental health crisis. And that's work that we got about to doing in Wayne County. And then in the system, we should not be rewarding prosecutors or judges for how long they can put somebody behind bars so that they're quote unquote tough on crime, but instead be asking how do we make sure, right, that we are thoughtful about the ways that we adjudicate in the system to provide people the things that they need and also make sure that the people in the local community are protected. And then in the jail and prison system, I think we need to be rushing services into those systems, right, so that we can be asking how do we get everybody the things they need. And then the last point I think we need to understand is once somebody has done their time, we cannot discriminate against them on the back end for having been involved in the system if you're serious about keeping them out of the system in the first place, right? And then lastly, let's remind ourselves that incarceration tends to track poverty. And poverty tends to track school opportunity. And there's a huge correlation between the disinvestment we make in public education and the probability of incarceration of people who live in those communities. And that is a function of our failure to invest in education on the front end. And so we need to be very invested in education systems to the point where for-profit prison operators will actually try to get contracts in communities with underfunded public schools. They understand the correlation, they make money off of it. And so we need to understand the correlation and fix it, right? And so I think we have to deal with this as the complex system that it really is, right? Rather than just thinking about one particular solution, I think we need to be very, very comprehensive about the kinds of solutions and reforms that we need. We need fewer people in jail, right? We need more people out in the communities, and we also need less crime. And we can do both of those things if we're thoughtful about the way we architect the system all the way through. Appreciate your question.
Thanks so much for talking to us. My name is Rennie Franceschi. You know, I think most of us agree with almost everything you're saying, but I think the big thing is, how do we change the conversation? Like right now, you know, it's very easy for Republicans to say, oh, he's a Marxist. You know, it's a radical, rabid Marxist saying these things. How do you change the conversation so that people will realize that that's not what it's about? That, you know, we actually have an enlarged government now. The government's getting bigger and bigger, but instead of providing any services for anybody, it's trying to incarcerate everybody and trying, like say, foreign wars and everything else. We have another $3 trillion in the latest, the big beautiful bill. So how do you change the conversation so that people will see what you want to do and how it's going to be good for them?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. I'm going to just, for folks who didn't hear it, the question is, how do you change the conversation? Number one, you don't ever back down. I mean, I hate to say it, but like, sometimes there's like, you know, the youngins say the word vibes, but the youngins say the word aura, right? Like, Democrats' aura is just, I mean, it's just like, you gotta be willing to fight, you know what I mean? And the funny thing is, you gotta be willing to fight, and I hate to say it, in a playful way. You gotta look like you like the fight, you know what I mean? And part of the problem with us is that we don't like the fight, and then we are upset about the fact that we're not having a serious conversation. Fine. I hate to say it, when they go low, you go lower, right? Like, if you're like, fine, you want to take this to the ground? I'll choke you out in the mud, if that's what you want, right? If you want to have an elevated conversation, we can have an elevated conversation. I will never back down to you, right? Because your talking points are bullshit. And at the end of the day, right, at the end of the day, you are wrong. And I'm not afraid to prove to you you're wrong. And this is the thing about it, is that we are losing a lot of folks to the idea that we're just afraid. Really, like, I mean, I think about like people under the age of 30, why we lost so many young men. It's because we come off as afraid. You think about this is real advice that they give the candidates when the issue of immigration comes up. They're like, you just shouldn't talk about it. I'm like, are you serious? My guy is trying to destroy the Constitution at the crucible of immigration, and you got people who are ripping babies from moms and moms from babies, wearing masks and not running away from the dastardly work they're doing, and somehow we're not going to talk about it? I just think you're like, this is some crazy shit. Like, you actually think that we should be funding ICE to the level that is higher than the Marines? Right? Higher than the FBI? Like, you think this is a good idea? And you think this is strength when you literally rip a baby away from a mom? So I just think that the way we change the conversation is to actually engage the conversation. If you believe that you are right, then you have to be willing to go and fight for what's right. And we do this thing. I'll just explain to you how it happens. All right? I just want you all understand how this happens. Democrats have been playing not to lose for a very long time. So what they do is they poll everything, and then they speak to the center of the poll. And if the issue is not popular, they don't talk about it. And if the issue is popular, they talk about it, but not in ways that'll piss off the donors. So that leaves you a space to work that's about this big, right? And And the problem with it is that these are not followership jobs. These are leadership jobs. Your job is not to just say what's already popular. Your job is to make popular the things that are right. And it means you sometimes have to go first. You have to say the thing that people are like, well, I don't know that I agree with that. And you're like, well, let me explain to you. Let me share with you. Let me tell you what, I mean, imagine a kindergarten teacher approached teaching kindergartners the way that politicians approach their constituents. They're like, okay, today we're going to learn the ABCs. And the kids are like, I don't know the ABCs. We're like, actually, maybe not. Let's just go back to coloring. And then you wonder why people aren't moving with you. It's because you're afraid. So I just think the way that we win these conversations is to go out and have a good time bashing the shit out of stupid ideas. That's it. Like, that's the work. I think, Jordan, how are we on time?
Are we?
We are, just a second. We have 3 minutes if we're going to stop at 8.
Okay. So when do I have to, like?
8:30. So
8:30. So who here wants to stay until 8:30? All right. Okay. Who wants to leave? If you want to leave, go ahead. He just a really important question about incarceration, but it's not incarceration. All right. So I saw your hand, and then your hand, and then your hand. You guys have to remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5 is good.
All right, Jordan called it a 5. I'm sorry. Maybe there's gonna be like shared questions. I have to bring it. I'm gonna be quick. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Vicki.
Hi, Vicki.
I'm an ex-post-intensive care nurse for about 3 years.
Thank you.
Give her the mic.
Yeah. So my name's Vicki. I'm an ex-post-intensive care nurse, about 3 years doing that before I burn out. But I'm particularly interested in healthcare in particular, and I've been particularly disturbed by what's been happening with women's healthcare recently, and I haven't heard yet what your position is about access to abortion care, especially if there's miscarriages and such.
Well, thank you for the question, and let me just be absolutely clear. I believe deeply in a woman's right to choose. I believe deeply that people have the right to decide what happens to their own bodies. I believe that government should not be telling people or doctors or parents what kind of health care can be provided. And I also think that we have to be honest about this conversation, because too often we lose the discussion because we're not willing to actually explain what happens. The number of times I'm told about late-term abortion. I'm like, do you know what late-term abortion is? Like, they characterize one of the most painful moments in a person's life as if it was some sort of careless decision. Somebody carried a pregnancy for like 8.5 months and they were just like, maybe I'm not sure. Late-term abortion, the vast majority of the time, is a situation in which this fetus is not going to be viable. And it is heartbreaking, heart-wrenching for a family. And the risk of carrying to term may put mom's health at risk. This is one of those moments that families grieve for a long period of time. And the problem with it is that we run away from this conversation. Right? No, I just think it's really important for folks to actually step into the conversation and explain what's actually happening here. How dare you try and make political hay about one of the most heart-wrenching moments in a person's life? And the idea that you think that the right thing is to force this person to carry to quote-unquote term, and then potentially put doctors in a position where they cannot render necessary medical care at risk of losing their medical license in that moment, and then celebrate that as some kind of win, is insane. And so, one of the things I'll tell you is that in this job, I'll have to confirm judges. Judges will not get my confirmation vote if they're not 100% clear on this question about a woman's right to choose, and they will not get my vote if they're not 100% clear about the fact that the 14th Amendment does not protect corporations and that money is not speech. Those are my red lines. If you want my vote, you better be absolutely clear on these questions. So I appreciate the question. who's number 2? Hey, number 2, how are you?
Hi, my name's Laura. Actually, I was 16 when you ran for governor, and I got my whole family to vote for you.
Ah, Laura.
I was out there, and I was so excited to see that you were talking here. Just Butcher is here, so. So I guess my question is, so I have a lot of climate grief. I think about climate change all day, every day. Cry about it a lot. Trying to do what I can, and I just feel so exhausted and like frustrated. I don't, even our like progressive candidates, like they are not delivering on climate change. They don't want to talk about it. Like you said, other things like I never see a plan. It's like they're like, oh, look at all these other things, and then oh yeah, climate change. And I'm like, that's the single most greatest threat we face as a planet, as beings together, not just humans, like everything. So there's a lot of grief on my heart, and I guess like I don't know. It's just like I would love to hear like what like if you have like lots of thoughts or like any plans or action like how you're willing to like go for and fight for climate action. Yeah.
Thank you for, number 1, thank you for your support back when you were 16. Back, I just want to be clear for everybody watching, she didn't vote for me. She just got her family to vote for me. And this time I hope you'll vote for me, and also thank you for moving back to Michigan. Look, I really appreciate the question, because you're right, this is an existential risk. And the fact that we have been willing to cede this conversation is, again, one of those places where I think we've missed a real opportunity. Let me try and explain where that cowardice comes from, and then how we fix it. When you talk about renewable energy, the way that it was often presented is that we are going to shut down all of fossil fuel energy, and then we're going to build all the renewable energy. And a lot of folks said, well, if you do that, my energy costs are going to go up, and you're going to eliminate a lot of jobs. And my point is, first of all, right, that is not what people are saying. But second of all, okay, let me just take your arguments away from you. We should be massively investing in renewable energy right now. That includes wind, that includes solar, it includes small-scale nuclear. We should be investing it anywhere and everywhere, and we should be doing it in ways that create incredible union jobs. So if you do that, you can drop people's energy costs, and at that point you can say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be burning stuff that comes out of the ground into the lungs of our babies, because we don't need this stuff anymore. And so it's the investment in those things that has to happen now. But look, right now you see Trump and the Republican Party literally trying to tax renewable energy. And the reason they're doing it is because they're doing the bidding of the fossil fuel corporations who don't want to be forced into this. So all of this goes back to that first point that I tried to make. It all goes back to corporate money in politics. And so if you start rebuilding the firewall between our economy and our politics in ways that renders their money useless in the public debate, then we can start having an actually coherent and rational conversation about the existential threat of climate change. So I really appreciate your question. Number 3. Hey, number 3.
I think this is a perfect segue. So I'm Ginger, I live here. Exactly my question. So I like a lot of what you're saying. I think that you have a lot of good ideas. I think you have a lot of fire. How are you as a candidate personally protecting yourself and protecting your ability to speak truth to power and protecting your ability to do all this policy work that it sounds like you were highly, fired up to do? What are you doing in your campaign to keep yourself? Are you making promises not to take back money? What are you doing in your campaign that is going to allow you to actually be the voice for the people that you say that you want to be?
Why, Ginger, I appreciate your question. Because I am the only person running for U.S. Senate who has never taken a corporate PAC check and never will take a corporate PAC check. You got some folks who are like letting it rain corporate PAC checks. You got other folks who let it rain corporate PAC checks until they got embarrassed and said, oh, I don't do that anymore, right? And then you got me who are like, that was bad shit the first time. You shouldn't have been doing it ever. And if your understanding of U.S. politics is such that you did not realize that this was a problem, then I'm so sorry, but if you just realized it yesterday, it's really hard for me to trust that this is foundational to how you think about your politics, right? And so when I ran back in 2018, was talking about corporate money in politics. I've been saying the same thing now for like the better part of 10 years. It's a big reason why the most consistent person in American politics, Bernie Sanders, endorsed us from the jump in this race, right? And so the thing you'll get with me is, I'll just say this, like, I didn't grow up dreaming of being an elected official. In fact, I think the job's gonna kind of suck. Like, can you imagine having to hang out with like Chuck Grassley? Part of me was like, what are we going to talk about? The one thing I will tell you, Chuck Grassley enjoys ice cream. So me and him are going to go find some Dairy Queen and be like, yo, let's talk about this, okay? But also, I wish you just didn't, like, the whole dairy farm ag thing, like, is killing, anyway. But this is the these are the things I think about. I'm like, what am I even going to talk to a lot of these people about? Like, I don't even know. I'm doing it because, at the end of the day, like, I know what my life should have been, but for an accident of history. And I also was my grandmother's grandson. And she made it very clear that the thing you've got is opportunity, and the thing so many other people don't have is that same opportunity. Right? That cousin of mine, smarter than me, died in an automotive accident. 27 years old. Right? That is not my life. So I always just take my chips and put them back in the middle. My point, the point of my life, is to try and build opportunity for people. I've tried to do it at every turn I had the opportunity to take. Right? And I did it when I moved back from my tenure track job at Columbia to rebuild a health department in Detroit. I did it when I went back to public service after I ran. Like, this is the thing I'm gonna be about, right? And so, to me, it's existential, and I see politics as a way to fight for the kind of ideals that empower people who otherwise don't get a fair shot, for whom it is too hard to have that fair shot, to make it a little bit easier. So I really appreciate the question. Who was number 4? Oh, no, number 4. Good, sir. How are you? Good.
I'm a person that cannot details. I don't use that wide. When I talk, I just by feeling. I'll talk louder. I understand what the feeling is. My bottom line throughout this entire thing has been the normalization of dishonesty. It's a psychological, sociopathical, and how can we protect ourselves going forward? The First Amendment does not apply to deception and lies. How does it get our system to actually protect us as it should have when we didn't get that guy impeached and in prison and basically guillotined because they just pardoned if they stay in power? How will we address? I mean, I do it online. I'll wrap this up so you can answer it. My question to most of the people, when they're just honestly lying, they're parroting, they're making up stuff, just to block, just to deflect, to put it on me, to accuse me of what they're doing, that kind of thing. My question to them is, do you want your kids to grow up understanding that it's okay to lie if you win? Is that the lesson you're teaching the children? So we need to bring in those children and find out what's your take on what mom and dad are saying.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what you can do as a successful leader to help us rein that in.
I really appreciate the soul of your question. Back when I first met Bernie, when I ran in 2018, he told me something I've never forgotten, which is that in this business, you're either really good at lying or really good at telling the truth. And he looked at me and was like, you don't strike me as a good liar. So I try to be really good at telling the truth. I'm afraid the problem is even bigger than lying or telling the truth. It is about the ways that our public conversation has been divided and monetized by huge corporations to incentivize a certain kind of speech. And the certain kind of speech that it's incentivizing doesn't actually matter if it's true or it's not true. It matters whether or not it drives clicks and drives attention. And in that ecosystem that we've now created, lies tend to drive more attention, so lies are what you hear. And it's made it easier to obfuscate because the truth doesn't get very far, and the lies go everywhere, and chances are by the time that people even realize you're lying, they've moved on to the next thing.
And nobody can trust it.
Right. So I think part of it is about trying to address the mis and disincentives in our public conversation. We should have, the Senate should have regulated social media a long time ago. And don't get me wrong, you are entitled to the freedom of your speech. You are not entitled to algorithmic amplification of your freedom of speech. Right? You're allowed to go stand on the stump today and lie. You are allowed to go do that. Right? I don't think you should be allowed, I don't think you should do it. Right? But it becomes a very dangerous thing if you say, well, outright lies. But look, you're not entitled to now, all of a sudden, demand that the whole world hears the lies you tell from your stomach. See what I'm saying? And so I think that the bigger issue right now, in terms of where we can really intervene on the issue that you're talking about, is on addressing the algorithms and the ways that they've taken over our lives. To the other point though, the best thing you can do to drown out a lie is to tell the truth better. And I think that we have to be really, really smart about how we tell the truth in a moment where it's become so easy to lie. And in a world where kids can say what is winning nowadays, right? I mean, the number of young people I talk to, I'm like, what do you want to be when you grow up? They're like, I want to be an influencer. What does that mean? Like, what do you want to influence? They're like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, so maybe you should ask that question first. But the point that I'm making is, you've got to venerate the telling of truth. And I think as a culture, you're right. Like, we're tipping into a point where it's become way too easy to win when you lie. And I think for all of us who believe in the truth, we've got to commit ourselves to making sure that the lies can't be so easily amplified. And we've got to commit ourselves to being able to always empower and celebrate the truth. I think to the point about punishment versus alternative, I think it is enticing to want to go and like smite the evildoers. I just think that it's actually not a winning strategy if you want the good thing to win in the end. And I understand entirely the instinct.
Constitutional protection of free speech cannot mean you're free to deceive. It cannot be. And we're letting that go. That's like the Democrats.
Well, let's talk afterwards if I got some time. But I hear you. And I'm just saying that the question is, so I'm a parent, right? I got my 7-year-old, my 2-year-old. My 7-year-old is like getting smarter than me now. And so sometimes when I think about like, all right, so I just saw you do a thing that's a behavior I don't really want you to keep doing for whatever reason. It's probably bad for you. Do I show you the better behavior, or do I tell you not to do this behavior? And I've found that I do a lot better when I try to show the alternative and the value of the alternative than if I'm just being like, don't do that thing. And I think sometimes people are a lot more willing to hear what to do rather than what not to do. I may be wrong about this, but that's both my experience. I appreciate the question though. I think it's a really important one. The last one, who was number 5? Were you number 5? Good sir, you bring us home.
Yeah, as a freshman senator in the newly elected majority party in the Senate, who will be there in 2027.
I love your future.
Going on for another 6 years, and you go out for that ice cream cone with Chuck Grassley, and you have a bill that really you wanted to pass. He said, you'll never get bipartisan support on this. What would that bill be that would make you eliminate the filibuster?
Yeah. So I do. So the bill would have been like, I get the bill for the ice cream. I'm like, listen, man, I don't know. How'd you get Grassley's vote? I bought his ice cream. Might work. Look, I believe we need to abolish the filibuster. And let me just explain why we need to abolish the filibuster. It is truly anti-democratic. Now, a lot of folks would say, well, if we abolish the filibuster, think about all the things that the Republicans would get away with. Well, think about all the things they're getting away with already, right? But also, the thing about the filibuster is, I hate to say it, it protects people who otherwise would have to take a vote they don't like. And oftentimes, it protects people on both sides of the aisle. So my point is, listen, I just want you to have to take a vote. And then I want democracy to do its thing, because now you've got to go back home. You've got to explain to the good people, and you name the state, about why you took that vote, right? That's what I want. And if we do that, it's rendering an actual democratic process back into the Senate, which has, I think, the upshot of allowing us to do some really big things over the long term, right? I will say this. As much as I joke about having to hang out with Chuck Grassley, the job is one where your work is about persuading about what the best future looks like. I've been asked by a lot of folks, they're like, well, Abdul, like, you're standing on principle. Do you have the courage to stand alone? I was like, yeah, I have the courage to stand alone. But the better question is, do you have the ability to make sure that people stand with you, right, where you are standing? So really you're asking, do you have the courage to stand on principle? And then do you have the persuasive ability to bring people with you? And the thing I'll tell you, I just want you guys to like play this forward in your mind, all right? We are going to build a movement here in Michigan, right? And we're going to do it by going everywhere and talking to everybody. Notice, I'm from Ann Arbor, right? This is my first town hall in Ann Arbor, because I've been all over the rest of the state having these conversations in places like Petoskey and Antrim County and Three Rivers and Escanaba, yeah? And when you build that kind of a movement, you have an opportunity to show people themselves in a political movement that they never saw before. That's how you get folks out, right? So a lot of times in places like this, people are like, where are all the young people? I'm like, well, politicians don't talk about issues that young people care about. I do. So that's how you get them to come out. If we do that, and I win this race in 2026, I want you to think about what the implications will be for 2028. Because now I'm going to use that platform as the junior senator for Michigan who just surprised everybody, right? By running this campaign, centering working people and building a coalition of voters together. I'm going to be going everywhere and talking to everybody. And if you want to run for president in 2028, you better be willing to talk about working people's issues and to be honest about the future. That kind of persuasion has the ability to force the Democratic Party to rethink its strategy. They love to say that politics like this can't work in Michigan. Oh, that's New York. Oh, that's California. You can't do it in Michigan. Watch us do it in Michigan. And when we do, now you can't say you can't do it in Michigan. My argument is that's what works in Michigan, right? So we have an opportunity to start changing the conversation in ways that can persuade folks to be seeing a viable electoral strategy that centers working people at the heart of it, all right? And I think that kind of power matters. Now, I'm going to just finish us off here. A lot of people say, and I can imagine, we can't lose this seat in 2028. And I agree with them. 2026, excuse me. We absolutely cannot lose this seat in 2026. I played a lot of sports growing up, and I always knew when we were playing not to lose or when we were playing to win. If we want this seat in 2026, we cannot play not to lose. We have to play to win. And the only way to play to win is to be having conversations about what we need to do to bring people back to our electorate. Democratic Party thinks that if you run something perfectly inoffensive, that's how you're going to win. You're going to run right up the middle, it's going to be perfectly inoffensive, and that's how we win elections. I am so sorry. But if you've learned anything from Donald Trump, perfectly inoffensive is not how you win elections. All right? You've got to create something that forces people to take a stand and make a decision. And I know when we're offering you guaranteed health care and we're offering you an economy that works for you, not the corporations and the billionaires, and we're offering you the ability to take a big deep breath and know that that stuff's not killing you, and we're offering you the opportunity to go to a grocery store where a meat packer hasn't fixed the price for your chicken, I know that that wins votes. So we have to play to win. Now listen, I'm a child of immigrants, I do math, okay? Do you know we lost in 2024? We lost young men. And we lost Arab and Muslim voters. And I just happen to be an Arab Muslim young man. And I say that only to say that I know how to I've been having a coherent conversation with these communities for a very long time. And if we want to win them back, then we have to go and win them back, okay? Ignoring them or pretending like they don't exist or putting our head in the sand is not going to do it. I'm also the father of 2 daughters. I desperately, desperately, desperately want to build an America where they are not excluded either because of their faith or their names or their ethnic identities or their gender. We can have nice things. We've just got to go get them, all right? We are running a campaign that can win. If I've said anything that's compelling today, I hope that you'll help us, all right? I cannot do this by myself. This is not about me. This is about all of what we can do together. So if you would like to see me on the ballot, right, then you can sign our petitions right there and help us to get on the ballot. Okay, that's number one. Number two, if you would like to be a part of this campaign, there are 2 ways to do that. You can give your time, you can give your treasure. If you'd like to give your time, you can go to abdulforsenate.com/volunteer and you can sign up to volunteer. If you would like to give your treasure, and I hope you will, then you can go, you can do a couple of things. A, you can text 74801. Join to 74801 and join our movement. You can give us $5, you can give us $15, you can give us $7,000. But I hope that you'll consider making a contribution. I don't ask people who want to corrupt our politics for their money. I ask people who want to fix our politics for theirs. And you look like a group of people who wants to help fix our politics. I do too. I hope you'll contribute to the campaign. The last thing I'm going to ask you is probably the hardest one. All right? I'm almost certain that people in this room know somebody with whom you have not had a conversation for like 7 months now. Or maybe 4 years and 7 months now. Or even 8 years and 7 months now. And I'm going to ask you to have a conversation with that person. And let me explain to you why. People voted for Trump for a constellation of reasons. Whether it was hate, or fear, or anger, all of them come back to the central issue of feeling insecure in your life. And if we claim to be a movement of mercy and empathy, then we cannot continue to hold people accountable to a moment of insecurity. We have to be what we say we are. We cannot win this by being the equal opposite of them. Because here's the thing, Donald Trump has one neat trick. He's able to make himself the subject of every conversation and force people to make a choice. I happen to be a married man, so I have made many, right? Doubled down on many dumb ideas. And thankfully I'm married to an incredible human being who does not hold me accountable. And thankfully I do not double down for too long, okay? But I know what it feels like to be wrong and be like, I'm doubling down anyway, right? And I'm rather certain there are a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump who are feeling just like that. And the problem is, too often on our side, we want to prove them wrong rather than inspire them to get to right. And that's the thing that you can only do when you rebuild a human bridge with somebody. And so what I'm asking you to do is reach out to them. Don't talk about politics, okay? How's your dog? How's the weather? How was your summer? How do you feel about rural hospitals? But reach back out to them, right? Invite them back into your life. Force them to see your humanity and see theirs, right? Because in the words of a truly great president, a house divided on itself cannot stand. Thank you so much.